Good morning, everyone. I'm Pam Thornton. Welcome to our webinar on change management skills for the HR professional. Happy to have you here today. We will be using the Q&A feature for questions. On your bar, you'll see Q&A up top. That's where we'll be able to interact. Mostly the chat feature is not enabled for webinars, but if you do have questions, please put your questions in the Q&A. We'll certainly allow for time at the end of the webinar to answer questions and chat. But also, put your information in if you have questions as we go through the program today. We will be sending out the slides and the recording later today as well. So, be prepared for that if you're looking for the slides. All right, let's get started. What are we going to talk about today? Really, today we're talking about change management, what it is, why it's important. Certainly looking at the key things to consider when trying to make a change in your organization. And how do we get people committed to making the change? There's a few different options that I'm going to provide to you in terms of proven models. What I will say is that there's tons of them out there. There's lots of different ways to approach this, but you really need to be kind of looking at a programmed way, a planned way, and certainly a simplified way to get through when you are looking at change management. And then we're going to look at talking through the essentials to get you through that change management process. What does that really look like? So what do we mean when we say change management? What are we talking about? What is that? It is actually a systematic approach to supporting employees and teams as an organization transitions to a new process or a new tool or a new strategic initiative. That is how it's defined. So it really is about looking at something that's tangible. And then really looking at the process, the tools, and the techniques to get through the change management process, to really manage it and manage the people side of getting to where we need to be with that business outcome. That is specifically what we are talking about today and how it's defined. So when we think about when does this show up in our organizations? There's lots of different opportunities, but for purposes of this webinar today, I tried to think of some things that potentially would be happening in your organizations at this point in time. So, if you have a new software rollout, or you're, going through a merger or an acquisition, that would be a time that you would want to look at implementing change management strategies and techniques. Changing our customer service initiatives. Customer service is so important. It's a lost art, really looking at how do we get customer service levels raised in our organization? What do those initiatives look like? So that would be an opportunity. Maybe moving to a new timekeeping system, payroll system, all kinds of different system moves, right? Is traditionally what we look at when we're looking at change management. And then, looking to diversify who we are, adding a new service or a new product to our current organization and our current structure. That's really when we look at change management as a whole and try to figure out how do we implement this? How do we go about it? These are some of the examples that we'll be talking about today. I also think from your perspective, if you do have some other things that you're going through, right, in the here and the now, that you would like me to reference in this webinar, this would be a time to put that information in the Q&A. If you are specifically going through some kind of change in your organization that we could get on the table and talk about. So please feel free to put in the Q&A if you have something specific that you'd like covered around a process or a change management initiative that's going on in your organization today. Okay, great. Oh, that's a big one. Really rebranding, going through a rebranding in an organization is huge. Compensation study, absolutely. rolling something out around jobs and salary adjustments across the organization, and leadership. Good points, all good points. All places where you want to be thinking about change management, because the process and the concepts are truly the same. So why is change management important? Why do we even consider it something that is an initiative that we want to put any effort against and around? I mean, it seems obvious, right? When a change is happening, Darlene, TIA leadership, compensation, rolling out new job titles and new job salaries. These are things that are people oriented. We have feelings that we have to manage. There's consequences if there's not a good positive feeling about the way change is rolled out, right? Not only could we have an issue with morale, but we could totally blow the intent of what it is that we're trying to do, which is really to manage our business objectives, meet our goals, have productivity, that is increased for the most part. You need to be aware of the importance of managing the change so that it reduces the impact that it has on the employees. Nobody likes change. Change is not something that, people are naturally going to adopt, right? So we have to figure out, as HR professionals and leaders, how do we get them to get their arms wrapped around it in a seamless way that doesn't feel like it's threatening, and make sure that we look to really understand where they're coming from and roll it out in a unified way, right? So that's really why this whole subject is coming up, to make sure that we're not doing something that makes people feel really uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable, change is uncomfortable, but our job is to make sure that it's as not comfortable or as it should be, right? So making it so that it's not this huge thing that people have to deal with and are worried about, helping them to understand what the benefits are, right? So that's really why it's important to have a plan around change management, not just to, throw it out there and expect people to adopt it. There's a lot that comes along with it. So change is something that certainly is constant, right? I think when we think about technology, it has made us move so quickly that we're almost moving too quickly, I think, as a result of technology. And I know some organizations have multiple platforms that they're dealing with. So not only is technology something that's making us move fast, but it's making us move fast across all kinds of different platforms that sometimes don't even talk to each other. So, another reason why, we really need to think about the way that we're communicating this. And it's certainly a benefit, right? Technology automates, technology brings us, to a place where we can do things faster, but it's about how we do them and making sure that we're doing them, in the smartest way possible. Certainly, global business, global economy has really forced us to make changes happen faster and to be more flexible and more agile and responsive. How many of us go home at night with, unanswered emails and have that pit in your stomach? Okay, and I know I'm going to get some more tomorrow morning when I walk in the door and I haven't finished what I've, gotten the night before. So simple example, but certainly, this is one of the things that, is top of mind when we think about change. Mark Sanborn says, your success in life isn't based on your ability to simply change. It's your ability to change faster than your competition, faster than the people around you. So if we're always trying to meet the demands of our competition and we're trying to be better than our competition, certainly this piece around change is another reason why we need to be thinking about how do we go about doing that, because it's important, right? All right. So benefits, what are the benefits to really thinking about the way we implement a change? It's going to happen anyway. If it's something that we want to do and we want to be successful, let's be proactive about it. Let's bring it to people. If we are embarking on a process, and we've decided what it is that we need to do from a business perspective, let's take the lead and really involve people, right? We're going to have more of a successful outcome if we do it in a way that people are on board. We certainly will have more control over the change as well if we make sure that people understand what it is and are upfront about it. It will help us to better plan and deal with the obstacles, anticipate the problems that might come as a result of it. And it really does give us more of a defined goal when we can kind of go through that assessment and really understand, okay, how is this going to feel for everybody? What are truly the things that we're going to deal with as obstacles as we go through making this change or implementing something different. So the benefit of really having a process is that you do have a lot more a proactive ability to make that change successful. Okay. So what is the change management process, right? There's definitely several models out there I mentioned earlier, and it is a step-by-step process. Anything that we do when we are in our regular day, we're meeting with a customer, we're meeting with an employee, we have a plan, right? So it's a plan for you to really implement change in a successful way. It really focuses on a few specific steps. So identifying what it is that you want to change. So if it's your software system, it's your change in leadership, you're doing a new rebranding, any of those kinds of things, you really have to figure out what it is and make sure that it makes sense. So communicating how you're going to go about it to your employees. So not just that the change is happening, but going through, this is the strategy, this is the vision around the desired change. And then really looking at, implementing that strategy, making the change, and then evaluating it, right? So there's pieces that you need to really think about as you're going through this process, but those are the main elements of what the change management process looks like. Sometimes we don't know that we need to change, right? So how do we know, when we think about, what's happened in our organization to do a rebranding, right? We've got to, come up to the times. Maybe that's one of the reasons, or our competition, is looking different than we are. So we're going through a rebranding. Our payroll, isn't meeting the needs. Our payroll system isn't meeting the needs that it was before. And we need to expand that or look at a different option. Looking at this piece around rolling out new salary and job structures, right? We're all dealing with a lot of pressure around pay equity, and you can't not turn on the news and hear about some kind of situation where there was inequity in the organization, and or the talent problem that we have, not having enough talent, and that it's very competitive and around market salaries. We're feeling it, we're hearing it. So anticipating that an obstacle is coming is great, but we're all dealing with a lot of obstacles right in front of us right now. So really understanding why you need to make the change. So how do we do it? Maybe we're seeing a decrease in profits, and we know that the product line that we have is oversaturated in the market. I've heard this from some members around some different products out in the market. So how do we differentiate ourselves? Well, we need to think about what that change is, define it, and then really look at implementing some kind of change. And then some organizations really just look at a self-evaluation process on a regular basis. And it is something that we recommend and is alive and well. Strategic planning, you hear about it all the time, but strategic planning also has elements of change management. So looking at, okay, as we go through our strategic plan, what are the things that we're going to need to change? What are the things that are going to need to evolve in our business as we move forward? So that's when we really know we need to change. I want to look at the who. So who do we involve in this change management process? We look at the key departments that are going to be involved if it's a certain departmental change. Are there other processes across departments that will be affected that we really need to look at? And then what are the external factors that are happening? Are there external factors that will truly affect what's going on with our change, right? We need to be looking at that whole piece and laying it out in the plan before we roll it out to everybody. So really looking at all the key stakeholders that will be involved in that change management process. Here's the big one. I think many of the people on this call today are in HR. So, as I was really kind of framing out what we were going to talk about today, I looked at, so what is HR's role in change management? We play a lot of different roles in the organization, and I think we could play many of these. There's 4 specific roles that HR can play in change management. We're talking about, being the change leader. So sometimes in our organization, we're the sole person, we're the sole group department that has to really have the vision and the strategy around the change. So we're doing that either on a small scale or on a large scale. We're also looking at being a change educator, right? So providing training, guiding people through the new change process, making sure that we educate people through workshops, creating really practical tools for them to use. And, if we're talking about a payroll system, what is the roadmap? What is the roadmap for them to change something that they've been doing for, a while or a long time and change their process? How do they go about doing that? So you need to be able to put together workshops and training and making sure that people understand how to go about making that change. And then certainly we're going to be the change advisor. We're going to get all the complaints. We're the ones that people come to when they want to complain, right? Sometimes they don't even come to their manager. They're going to go right to HR because people don't like change and they're resistant to change, right? So making sure that people have an understanding of, this is what the process looks like, and helping to be that advisor to them and understanding why we're making the change and what the benefits are going to be to them. And then certainly, we have to participate ourselves. So we might not always believe in the change, and it might be something that, is being rolled out. Maybe it's, by leadership, it might be by a larger global change in our organization. So really looking at how do we as participants show up? A lot of the times we're doing many of these different roles, but we also have to be behind the change. So looking at kind of our role and thinking about some of the things that you were all dealing with in your own organizations around change management, I encourage you to kind of look at, where do you fall? Are there ways that if you're not, in one or multiple of these categories, who is, and what's missing in your organization? Do you have someone who's the change leader? If it's not you as the educator and the advisor, who are those people in your organization that you want to be part of that process, that need to be part of that process? So that should be part of the assessment when you're looking at who does the change affect, right? It helps you to get the buy-in. So we talked a little bit about barriers. Certainly, people don't like change. It's not something that is natural for people. But why do initiatives fail? This is really, because of some of the barriers. We've got lack of clarity. People are certainly resistant to it, but we've also got lack of buy-in sometimes from managers. If we don't actually have a strategy that works for people and that people can understand and buy into, because we've explained it to them and given them the tools to be successful, it won't be successful. There's something, to be said for change fatigue, which is really, people trying to go through the change and manage it, but it's stressful if they don't understand how to use the new system, we'll say, and without having support and intervention, it can fail. People will not buy into it. They'll revert back to their old ways. So really looking at, what are the pieces around what you think might be barriers for your folks when you're implementing a change? really understanding what are some of the things that you think are going to be barriers, maybe by department, maybe by function, depending on what the change is, and really laying that out before you get there so that you can put together plans and strategies and conversations that to be proactive before that actually happens to you. Okay. So talk about a little bit about the change management models. This is kind of the tools that I really want you to be able to take away from here. It's an outline for you to really structure if you are going through a change. What are my choices? What are the things that I can do, and what does it look like for me? So there's a couple of models. There's one called the Lewin's change model, and it requires an unfreeze of what we're currently doing, a change, and then a refreeze, a really simplistic model, which we'll talk about. And then there's the ADKAR model, which again is fairly simplistic, creating the awareness around what the change is going to be, understanding and delivering what the desire and the benefit is of the change, providing the knowledge, giving people the ability and the opportunity to make the change and to give feedback around it, and then reinforcing the change. So really making sure that we're reinforcing, this is why we did it, this is the benefit of it, and making sure that people truly are adopting it. So reinforcing that change management. So we'll talk a little bit about Lewin's change model. This is really looking at, again, that process, what needs to change, making sure that we've got some strong support around the change before we make it. So, if it's coming from the top of our organization that we need to make some change to a process or an initiative, how are we going about making sure that we've got people who are actually on the ground who are going to be delivering it and living the day-to-day of the change? How do we make sure that they're involved in that? How do we make sure that we've got their buy-in, right? So getting that support from those key stakeholders, and then, creating the need. So how do I go about creating the need to transition, we'll say, a rebranding or a payroll system or a marketing plan or this piece around job and salary adjustments? How do I create that need for change? We create the business case. Here's why it's not working, right? So really putting together the key factors that say, these are the reasons why it's not working. Here is what it's costing our organization from a, dollars perspective. And then, really looking at things like how it's affecting our employees. Is it day-to-day stress? Is it turnover? What are the things that are the elements of the need for the change? And then managing and understanding the doubts and concerns. So having plans in place, people in place, well prepared to answer questions about, why we're making the change. So it's not just one person at the top saying this is what the new system's going to be. That everybody has an understanding of what the change is, and that you've got some real ambassadors and champions around your change that can get behind it and kind of be your cheerleaders, right? So you get to the place where you make the change, you're implementing it. There has to be even more communication during the time that the change is actually happening. It really helps to give people the opportunity to voice their opinion about things, to get to you with what are the concerns, what are the questions, where are the things that are not working? Because with every change, it's not seamless, right? Anybody who's ever done, a systems, change knows, hey, let's run dual systems for a while because we're not sure how this is actually going to flow and how it's going to actually roll out. So making sure that communication piece, those people that are your key communicators or champions are available. You've got, structure set up around that communication. And then making sure that you've got an opportunity to empower people to take their own action, right, when they need to. Being a part of the process to implement the change is really, really big. And it might not be right down to the individual contributor, but you've got to have champions across the organization who are, actively implementing the change, actively giving feedback around the change, or you will have a lot of trouble with adoption. And then, looking to refreeze. So the end of this is really kind of the refreeze of the new process or initiative, really anchoring that change into your culture, making it part of your narrative, your mission, your vision. You're really implementing something that is new, and you're not looking back, right? You're the words that you use in the not only in the work guidelines, but it might be in your handbook, it might be in your policies, it's in your standard operating procedures, right? That you're really, kind of refreezing that idea and that initiative. And then continued support and continued training. There's nothing worse than dropping in a new initiative or a new system, providing initial training, and then never having training again, right? Because we've been doing something for so long, and it doesn't always translate. Different things will come up, and you need to be thinking about how do we handle those kinds of operational things. So having ongoing training and ongoing support is something that will be critical when you implement a change. And then truly celebrating the success, right? It's work. It is not an easy lift when you make a change like this. So really celebrating those successes. So Lewin, who is the person who created this, really looked at, before you really make a change, you have to make sure that you are unfreezing the process, unfreezing the current initiative that you have. So really providing the detail and the again, business case, specific experiences around why it's not working, so that you can make people open to the change, really, and sharing what are the benefits that are going to be as a result of this new change or this new process or initiative. Here's what's going to happen. And this is transferable across all kinds of initiatives, leadership, any kind of change that you're making. And then really focus on and reinforcing the new behaviors and making them the new normal. Here's the new normal. And really making sure that people understand that this is the new way, the way that we're going to move forward. So talked a little bit about this already. People need to understand what's in it for them. And I'm really encouraging you to not only do this on a departmental, organizational basis, but have one-on-one conversations with people around the change that it is that you're making and how it's going to specifically benefit them. We are in a time where employees, managers, leaders, everybody is looking to figure out what is in it for them. They have options, they can go work in different places. So really making sure that people are rallied around the idea because they have an individual stake in the game, right? It's going to benefit them in some way. It will be more effective. They'll be more bought in, and showing the specific path for that person. It will take more work, right? Rather than rolling out a process with a policy, certainly. But you should be all in your organizations. You should have key players that will help you have these conversations, and it should be a unified front. So really thinking through how you do that is the unfreezing part. So how do we go about getting buy-in? I've talked a little bit about it here, but I think, when we are going through any kind of shift, people need to understand, what the process is going to be, but also thinking about how has that obstacle affected me? How has it, made it such that I haven't been able to do my work, my job, the relationships, whatever it is that's impacting me, how have I not been able to do that well because of the current process? So being able to really express in detail what wasn't working and how it affected people. And, when you're going through the change or going through the thought process around a change, getting buy-in from people before you make it is huge. So it might be focus groups, it might be, town hall meetings, talking through, and sometimes it's painful talking through all the, the issues and the downfalls of a process, right? I can think of, over the years, many systems issues where, it just wasn't, either it wasn't the right choice or the system didn't advance, it didn't advance with the time. So it no longer suited our needs, and people would complain about it all the time, right? So making sure that people have the opportunity in the forum to talk about it, and that you're getting their buy-in and their feedback, right? So showing them how it's going to improve their work, make work for others more streamlined, how it will help not only our business, but the way that we go to market, perhaps. So looking at, when we talk about some of the things around job and salary adjustments, how is it going to affect the rest of the organization? So it's about retention, right? And creating career paths for people. So making sure people understand what is in it for them is huge. Making that change, again, really providing the training, being available to respond to questions, and then understanding the resources and the other changes that we need to make this effective, because there will be things, and you need to allow time and space for this, that are going to come up that you cannot anticipate, right? Might be, as you're going through a change process, it might be a delay, right? That affects a whole bunch of other things. So having some contingencies in place is going to be important as well. So thinking through, what are those contingencies? And, specifically looking at, if this doesn't work, how are we going to deliver the product? How are we going to service the customer? How are we going to pay the people? What is our plan? Sometimes when you're going through an initiative around change, especially if it's systems related, you do have a backup system. When we're talking about leadership change and really looking at that, this is certainly a place where there's an opportunity to over communicate and get people's buy-in. Many of when we look at hiring and transitioning people, that creates a lot of uncomfortable strife, right? Where people are just not sure, okay, so how does that affect my role? If somebody's going to be coming in and we're going to be cross training, so I might feel threatened by that. So really creating that forum to hear the concerns, and we should be having the plan laid out about how it will truly affect things. So being able to anticipate problems is the moral of that conversation, is really understanding, okay, how is it going to affect Pam? How is it going to affect Susan? How is it going to affect the rest of the people in the organization? Really having an understanding of that, and anticipating how we might respond to that, because we will get those objections for sure. Okay. This is the concern, right? That change truly is hard. People will struggle. You can definitely plan on, some contingent of your workforce having challenge with the process. There's going to be people that are so excited they can't wait to, bring that new leader in, or get rid of that old system, or stop doing the 3-step process to place the order. They're looking for that streamlined change, but there will be people that will struggle with it, because it's not something that they're used to. It's a new way to do things, and a lot of us are on autopilot a bit, right? When you think about all the things that we have to get done in a day, there's a lot, right? So this is adding a new layer to what it is that we have to do. So expect struggle, and even little wins when you're going through, this kind of a process. Even little wins, should be given positive feedback, especially for the people that you didn't anticipate were going to adopt the change at all. Really making sure that you do reinforce that behavior, but you have to hold people accountable, right? There's going to be probably a group, many people that are going to want to revert back to, the old process. Well, we have a new leader. Well, I always if the new leader is, still there, and you've got another person who's, was the leader, and, they're just in a different role, they may revert back to always just kind of having that relationship and having that discussion with them. You will have to hold them accountable to some degree, but why wouldn't you, look to embrace that and figure out how to manage that change and how to manage that conversation. So really looking at holding people accountable when they do revert back to old processes, and it might just be through a conversation, but if it is around systems, making sure that we're sitting them down and having a conversation, understanding why. Maybe it's something about the process that isn't working, or maybe it's something that's a hurdle that takes longer. So really helping to understand what's driving that reason for them to kind of revert back. The communication, it's going to be a lift for everybody to communicate. It should be a way in which we over communicate. That should be the mantra, is really over communication during this process. And I, talked about the training piece earlier here, but the training is ongoing. So, and it might not be, refreshing of, the initial training. It really should be something that's laid out. And when you're working with any provider, if it's, something around a system or a process or even a policy, you're going to want to look at some interim steps around training to reinforce what it is that you're doing. Making sure that everybody kind of understands that, we understand that it's not easy for everybody to adopt, anything new, and that we want to provide the training for you to really make sure that you understand how to do it. And sometimes when we go through that process, our employees are best advocates, right? They're the people that are able to share with us what's not working. So having different groups working on some of the same things, to really figure out, okay, how did this group understand the information and how did this other group understand the information, and comparing notes and figuring out, okay, is there a system change that we need to make? Is there a process change that we need to make for the initiative? So really understanding that piece, right? So the refreezing piece of Lewin's model that I think is really interesting is making sure that we are, once we've kind of made this initiative our new way of life, following up with people to see how it's working. So how is it that it is being handled? How is it that we've implemented whatever initiative that it is for our organization, and how are people utilizing it now? So is it working for us? Did it do what we intended it to do? Because let's face it, not all new initiatives, not all new leaders, systems, policies, not all of them do what we intended them to do, right? So the only way to find that out is to really understand by talking with people, and even kind of going back to, some of the initial things that you did when you rolled out the change, looking at what the goals were and what the benefits were going to be. Did we meet those goals? Did we accomplish what we had hoped to through this process? So really, understanding that. And we talked about this a little bit already, but making sure people aren't regressing to old habits. And sometimes the system, if it is a system, the system disappears after a while. So there's, no opportunity to go back to the old system, but maybe they just stop. And I've heard this, they just stop doing that part of the process because it's just too hard in the new system, or it's just too hard to follow that new policy, or I just don't want to talk to that new leader. We don't get along. What do you do about that? And you have to have people that are circling back with people to understand and holding them accountable, making sure that you understand what their role is in that process, and that, hopefully, as we move forward with streamlining things, some of the harder things go away, right? But if that's not happening, if it's more complicated, we've got to do a bit of more, work. We've got to do a little bit of a reset and look at, what are the things that maybe didn't work in that process? Can we Can we keep the system? Can we keep the the policy the way that it's structured, or do we need to make some adjustments? Not all things just roll out and are effective. We have to look at that. So really looking at making that change permanent is part of it is going to be that communication. And then part of it is going to be enforcing that we are using, the new system, the new initiative, the new process. All right, the AdCare model. So this is another way to kind of look at, and hopefully you use these as kind of checklists. You'll have this information later. These are some simplistic models that I thought that, could be used across the board. This is actually a company called Proshi. They are a global leader in change management solutions. And the creator is Jeff Hyatt. He studied the change process for over 900 organizations. So not just large organizations, mid-sized, small organizations, and he really focuses on change at that individual level. So as I said earlier, making sure that each individual knows how that change is going to affect them, because we're more likely to understand and adopt something that we are aware of, right? That we're, involved in, right? So, and understanding, how it affects us. So that individual conversation has to happen, and that individual, understanding of how the change is going to affect me is truly important. So he uses 5 building blocks for change. The first one is truly this awareness, right? So, making sure, again, a lot of the same things, why does it have to happen? What are we looking to update, change, adjust, and why are we doing it? So, identifying that problem around the change, and then making sure that employees understand that it is something that has to happen, and here's why, and being that leader, being that champion to have that effective communication across the board is truly essential. So a lot of the same elements, creating that awareness. It's also making sure that they have enough incentive, right? So not only what's in it for me from the day-to-day work that I'm doing and how it's going to affect my day-to-day work, but how does it affect my future here? Is it career pathing? Is it how I'm going to interact with a different department? Is it my ability to move up the ladder, move across the organization and learn different competencies and, different roles within the organization? Or is it just, straight up just going to make my job easier? So really trying to tap into that desire. And then, making sure that, we understand that not everybody will respond to, one-on-one communication, that you've got to have multiple ways, multiple modes of communication. And so if, we're doing one-on-ones, we're doing, team meetings, we're sending emails, or, looking at training and workshops to help, people understand that people learn in different ways, they adopt ideas in different ways. They need to feel like they're part of the process. So making sure that we've considered all kinds of different communication methods, and that we're not just sending an email out to everyone about the change, I guess, of the moral of this component of the model is that you've got some different ways to communicate and help people to understand what's happening. All right. This knowledge, this training is not only on the individual basis, it's really also making sure people understand how it affects others. So, if it's a team change and, we're looking to, change a standard operating procedure within our team, how do we know how it not only how it affects my job, but how does it affect the other team members? And, what does that look like, not just for me, but for our team, and how we move forward in the organization? An understanding of roles and responsibilities for others for the individual is also important. So we don't want to lose sight of that piece, that making sure that people understand, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But if, there's pieces of my job that, aren't part of this process anymore, who's going to do it? And how does that integrate with everybody else? How does it affect everybody else in the department, in the organization overall? And then being that mentor, being that coach, again, ongoing training, ongoing communication, kind of the another way to kind of put it for this ad care model. Making the team being able to deliver in the role, right? So not having, if we've got a plan about how this is going to work out, and then we've got obstacles, well, now we've changed the job such that, Pam doesn't have to do that, the day-to-day of that, and maybe it's shifted to somebody else, but now I can't, because of what I've, the shift, I can't do some of the other things that I need to be doing because of the change that we've made. So really making sure that you look at, how does that person, how are they going to be able to deliver? How can they be successful? So sometimes it's about retraining or even training someone in a cross-functional role to make sure that they understand how to do the role, right? Or how to do the new process. So maybe that cross-training piece is a piece that you would want to consider. And then giving that employee the opportunity to talk through, okay, how are you going to plan for and make this part of your everyday, right? What is the training plan for you? Some people aren't going to have the same training plan as others, and some people are going to need more training. And being okay with that, the investment on the organization's part is one that, some people are just going to get the new process, they're going to get the change, or they're going to adopt it really quickly, but some others aren't. And it might not be because they don't think it's a good idea. It might be because they really don't understand it, or maybe their role is such that they can't take on another different way to do something. So really thinking about how it affects each individual on the team. And again, making sure the change stays. So this is the reinforcement part. Making it such that, the only way forward is by adopting this new process or initiative, that, maybe not even having the other process or initiative available, and truly through accountability, reinforcing that people aren't allowed to use it because it's not effective, or, sometimes it's, again, going to be that conversation. I think that attaching performance standards to some of these new initiatives certainly can be beneficial. In some cases, it will be essential, right? You might have a new leader in an org. You might have a new leader in an organization that people, aren't comfortable with, right? So how do we attach some of the performance pieces to that? So is it through further coaching? Is it through further understanding about why is the concern there? Is it about what the job looks like, or is it about what the role says we have to do? Really understanding that and putting some performance metrics around that, if we don't, kind of adhere to these things, that it could affect you individually, right? From a performance perspective. And so we have to have an assessment system in place. And I know for many of us, performance management is a hurdle in and of itself. So making sure that we have a unified approach to that is also important. So that's two models, Lewin model, and then also the ad care model. And, again, pretty similar, but pretty simplistic, I think, as well. So kind of looking at, ways for you to almost have kind of a checkoff sheet, right? So when we think about change management as a whole, kind of going back to the beginning, the things that are going to be important is some planning, right? Really looking at not, ready, fire, aim, don't roll something out, whatever it is, big, small, middle of the road initiative, because it's about our people, right? And our people need to adopt the change, or the change will fail, you might as well not have done it, right? If you can't get your people to adopt it. So you do that through communication, you do that through training, you do it through consistency. So treating, the change as the new norm, right? That this is the way that we're going to do things, and holding people accountable for it, right? I think that, there's lots of different ways to roll out change. And I think about, some of the calls that I get, that, people are just not adopting it. How do I get them to do it? And it all goes back to having that conversation and really understanding the why, right? So, and sometimes we have to kind of, double back, and we haven't done it the right way the first time. So we need to take a few steps back, right? And recommunicate. And it's okay to be a little vulnerable about that. Change is tough for everybody, and it doesn't always get adopted, and it doesn't always work the way that it's supposed to work. So understanding that you have some choices around the way that you do it, and that the way that you do it is probably the most important thing. It might even be more important than the change itself, because if people don't adopt it, it's not really going to be worth it, right? So be intentional, be thoughtful about the approach, and be consistent as well, right? So making sure that your consistency is something, throughout, whether it comes to communication, the training, the plan, that you're doing that across functions, doing it to all, having that training and that communication forum in all the areas that it's necessary, right? So kind of my final thoughts there. I've got a couple of, I had a couple of questions. Oh, Holly, yes, the slides will be available after the webinar. The other thing that we'll do is the recording will also come out with the slides in an email to all of the attendees. But I'd like to just open it up. I know I kind of talked about some methodologies, and hopefully you can use that as guidelines as you kind of go through, or think about changes that that you have to that you're anticipating, as we go through this year and beyond. Hopefully you can use those as tools. But I'd like to kind of open it up and see if anybody has any questions that I can help you, like we can talk through at this time. Any questions about anything we've gone through? For anyone? I'll just kind of leave it open here for a bit before we close out. And I thank you for your time today on the webinar. Thank you, Amanda. Thanks, everyone. All right, I'll stay on here for a bit if anybody has anything. I hope everyone has a great day. Enjoy your Thursday. And we'll talk with you soon.